Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for the Power Rangers Lightning Collection Ecliptor and Astronema 2-pack from Power Rangers in Space. You're probably thinking, Dawson, but you already reviewed Astronema. And I'm thinking, well, tough shirt. No, so Astronema has already been released in a different style with the Red Ranger from In Space, and they're kind of releasing different figures of her based on her different looks. This one is done based off of what I believe is her like early appearance, if I remember right, like her very first appearance, her first haircut and hairstyle and suit, and the one we got previously was the one based off of the arc when she found out she was Corone. There's also other ones to release, which I'll get into later, and I will be doing a comparison as usual, but let's go ahead and just talk about the accessories first. As you can see, they both have their weapons. He has a sword, she has her scepter, which I'll get into like a little more detailed when we go to the individual looks. In addition to the hands she has on her, which is just the holding weapon hands, you have the closed fist hands, and Ecliptor has an extra closed fist, as well as this really cool power, unlimited power, minutes, unlimited minutes. You also have this extremely extra lightning effect part here, this purple one for doing like blasts off of her staff, and this kind of cool one for wrapping around his sword. That sounded... But this one's pretty cool, and the other one's pretty cool. I'm going to be honest, I've mentioned in previous reviews, I'm kind of over these. Like, if we could save money on them, I would not be mad. Like, if these could go down a couple dollars, or even just $1 and not have these. Like, sometimes they're cool, but for the most part, outside of a unique one like this, they just end up in a baggie. And like this one, reminds me of the one that came with that Draken, like, special edition set. I'm like, what am I gonna, like, this is just too big. I don't have space for this nonsense. It's space, because Power Rangers in Space, man, I'm a genius! And also, there's a little boomerang. It's, like, really malleable, though. Like, it's a really soft boomerang. Like, it's, like, the safety version, and it's kind of cheap feeling. It's not like a huge deal, like, oh my god, Hasbro's trying to kill the brand because this is cheap. But it's just, like, weirdly, like, malleable. Let's talk about the figures themselves. We're going to do Astronomer first, because I said so. So you have a slightly different head sculpt. Again, we'll get into a comparison here in a minute. And it looks fine. I think both Astronomer head sculpts look fine. Like, they don't look exactly 100% accurate, but they're in the neighborhood enough for me for a figure in this price range. I'd like to see them improve on it, but it's nothing that would stop me from buying the figure. She kind of has a weird, like, I just ate a lemon look on her face. This is a really obscure reference, but if anyone watches The Chase, it reminds me of the guy James of The Chasers, who has this perpetual look like he just had some excrement rubbed underneath his nose. Like, that's what it looks like. This is getting weird. But let me compare it to the head sculpt here. So you have the two different head sculpt. This one obviously has more makeup on, so if that's a huge deal to you. Like, for me, they both are kind of roughly in the neighborhood. Not quite there, but fine enough for me. Like, if this is just on the shelf at a decent distance, I'm like, yeah, that's Astronema. If you get up real close, they're real weird. I would say this one seems a little bit more nuanced. This one seems a little bit more deadpan and like a little more royalty-free Astronema. You can also see the differences in outfit here. You know, she has this armored outfit here from the arc that I was talking about. And also, she actually has like a necklace that looks like it's removable, and this one's molded on. And I think the necklace on this actually looks a little bit cooler. Something else of note, though, the staffs are only slightly different. You can mainly see it in the tip, is that this one has that more cheaper plastic feeling look. This one's a little bit more polished. It's ever so subtle, but I feel like they have been cutting back with cost, using a lot more cheap gray plastic. It's something I've noticed, and it's unfortunate, but it's nothing that's going to stop me from buying or recommending the figure. And this is like, so like I can notice it, but that's only because I'm looking for it. It's not a huge deal, but the difference is there. But you can see the differences there in the different versions, and there's other versions that they could release down the line. I think most notably, the only other one I would want, which they could easily release in a 2-pack with Ecliptor again, is their post-brainwashing ones where she gets like the bob haircut, and you could have them releasing that one with the Ecliptor that had kind of just like the mechanical parts on his cheeks. I think that's another one they could do. You know, I think it's kind of neat they're doing this because they are distinct looks and it works, and Corone Astronema is one of my favorite PR characters, but I also don't necessarily need these two individually. I'd be more than happy with just one and make it maybe an alternate head. But hey, I guess it's kind of neat, and it's something that maybe we wouldn't have gotten in the past. But now just focusing on her by herself, like I mentioned, I think she overall looks pretty good. I do kind of like that the necklace is more tangible and it kind of pops out more. The head sculpt's overall decent. I think the armor and the body sculpt is overall solid, and I think the details are overall solid what it's supposed to be. There's nothing too huge missing or wrong with the proportions or anything that I notice. The articulation is your par for the course stuff. You get a nice ball joint here, swiveling here at the leg. You get your double knee joint here. You get the nice little hinge joint here on the foot. You get the chest and waist articulation. You can see the hinge joint here at the waist and then the chest ball joint here. You have a nice ball joint at the arm, swiveling, double elbow joint here. You have the swiveling at the fist, and of course you have the head and neck articulation that's going to be a little bit hindered by her head, and fortunately no loose joint problems. So overall, a fine figure. You know, I think I'm happy with both of these Astronomer figures for what they are. Could they be a little bit better? Sure, but I still think they're overall damn solid figures, and I'm fine with it. Now let's talk about Ecliptor. I feel like I have mixed thoughts on Ecliptor. Like, in terms of the paint, I think he looks really good. It's kind of got this nice matte finish, which sometimes I really like because it both looks and feels kind of neat, and I think the green looks really nice off of it. With that being said, this feels like more of a nitpick, and again is something that personally would not stop me from buying this figure, obviously because I have it right here in front of you. The proportions on him seem a little bit too puffy, a little bit too blocky. Like, it might seem like some to look like the suit in the show. Honestly, I looked up some pictures before this, and I can't remember if maybe he looked more like this in our footage, but looking at the pictures of Ecliptor's character from Mega Ranger, he's a little bit more slender than this. This almost feels like the rubbery foam version of it. It just looks a little bit off to me. I'll just be honest, both in the chest and I think most notably the head looks a little bit puffy for me. This is also a really weird nitpick, but this weird line here, it is present kind of in his design when you look at pictures, but on the figure it looks like he got his head cut off and sewn back on. But other than that, I think he looks pretty good. Like, the head sculpt proportion I feel is a little too puffy compared to the show, but I think it looks good in terms of like capturing the, for lack of a better word, personality of him. And like, it's kind of a hard figure to screw up detail wise because all you really have is this sort of matrix looking black and green, so I think that looks good. You have kind of all the same articulation I just went over with Astronema, except it's like hindered here on the chest a little bit, and you have some hindering of the plates touching together here. No loose joint problems there, and he feels solid, but he just seems a little too puffy to me. The sword overall looks pretty good in my opinion. I think it's got at least nice silver paint here. I'm glad this isn't that cheap gray, a good proportion wise and all that stuff. But let me compare him to the only other version I own, which is the classic 90s version. And one thing that is obviously is different is you have this giant red thing here, which is for this slashing action. So this is obviously the superior version. Get out of here, trash. I'm gonna be honest, low key, this isn't a bad figure. Like, usually I bring in the old 90s or 2000s version and it's like, hey, this is okay. It's kind of fun for nostalgia collectors, but this is the superior version. I'm not saying this is the superior version, but compared to past ones I've pulled out, this one is not half bad, especially since the last one I pulled out for a comparison was Pudgy Pig out of the villain drawer, and that one was like far and away worse than the Lightning Collection ones was, aside from the fact that it stored food in it. But this one is not half bad. I just want to highlight that, outside of the fact that it's kind of more of a feature figure and stuff like that. But I wanted to highlight that because actually, I wouldn't say this guy's more accurate, but I would say the proportions for me, actually on this one, probably a hot take, maybe, I don't know, there's a lot of Lightning Collection haters out there, but the proportions on this one actually are a little bit more accurate to me when I look at the pictures. I would actually say if you merge the overall detail and quality of this with the proportions of this, you would have the perfect Ecliptor figure. I just found that kind of interesting. Maybe it's just me, but I was a little bit surprised. I'm not saying like, oh my god, hell with Hasbro, they're trying to kill the brand, buy this original version. But I just thought it was interesting because more often than not, I don't have very much to say positive about the old version in regards to comparison. With that being said, I still think this is a decent figure. Like, it does seem a little bit off to me, for sure. And I think that they could possibly release a version that's much more accurate proportion-wise. But I still think it's a cool looking figure. Like, setting aside my reviews and all that, I would still totally buy this as a cool Ecliptor figure for my in-space display. And I don't think it's like one of those things where it's like a missing paint app, like a Drago Ranger's helmet or something, or like Pink Ranger where it's like 5 different pink colors that it feels off. It's just something that's off to me, but I still think it's a solid figure. And so, overall for this set, it's a little bit hard recommendation-wise. I think if you're a huge Ecliptor fan and you're not too nitpicky, I think you'll be more than happy with this. Like I said, I have my problems with the proportion, but it's nothing that I'm like, ugh, don't buy this. It just seems off, but I still think it's a solid figure. But I'll say that as far as Astronema goes, it just feels rather unnecessary. I would say I recommend this to huge in-space fans or people that are really impatient and want one or the other right now. But otherwise, maybe wait it out. I mean, you might have already had Astronema, and I could totally see them doing another Ecliptor later. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird set. I don't think it's a bad set, but I'm not like jumping out of my seat for it, if that makes any sense. But that's about it for this one, guys. Until next time, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. See notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.